Hello and welcome to the agenda. I am Ajay Kaul. In this program today we will discuss about the possibility of waiver of intellectual property rights on COVID vaccines by WTO. Eight months back, India and South Africa had approached the World Trade Organization or WTO with a proposal that conditions for granting patents be temporarily suspended with respect to COVID related vaccines, etc., so that production could be stepped up without any legal complications. The proposal remained virtually in the cold storage even as COVID continued to wreak havoc across the world. Now recently the issue got some life as the US expressed in principle support to the waiver and some other countries joined in. But will we see the WTO granting waiver in the near future? We will try to understand this in the agenda today. We have with us retired diplomat Ambassador Deepak Vora and Advocate Karmanya Singh, who is an expert on intellectual property rights. But before we start our conversation, have a look at this small report.
The US recently announced support for waiving intellectual property protection for COVID vaccines, saying extraordinary circumstances call for extraordinary measures. This comes 8 months after India and South Africa asked the World Trade Organization to waive certain conditions of the trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, or TRIPS, agreement that could impede timely access to affordable medical products to combat Covid-19. The two countries had asked the TRIPS Council to recommend as early as possible a waiver on the implementation, application and enforcement of 4 sections in the second part of the agreement. These sections 1, 4, 5 and 7 pertain to copyright and related rights, industrial designs, patents and the production of undisclosed information. The proposal had said that developing countries especially may face institutional and legal difficulties when using flexibility available in the TRIPS agreement. US Trade Representative Catherine Tai said the US will pursue text-based negotiation on the waiver at the World Trade Organization. Text-based negotiation involved negotiators exchanging text with their preferred wordings and then thrashing out a consensus on the working, a fairly long drawn affair. Meanwhile, some other countries like New Zealand have expressed support for a waiver. The European Union, which had earlier opposed the waiver, has now stated its intent to discuss the US-backed proposal, but for a waiver to be granted, all those 164 WTO members must agree on the draft. Even one member country can veto it. And there are countries and some big pharma companies like Pfizer and AstraZeneca which are opposed to any waiver. Even Bill Gates is opposed to any tweaking with the IPR rules. So it is not an easy process. Bureau Report.
Now let's welcome our guests Ambassador Vora and Advocate Karmanya Singh. Welcome to the program, both of you. So I'll first go to Ambassador Vora about the IPR issue. You know, it has got some momentum recently, although it was in cold storage for all these 8 months. Now since US has expressed in principle support, so how do you see this entire scenario now on the IPR issue related to COVID vaccines?
Thank you very much, Mr. Kaul. It's always a pleasure to interact with you, to learn from you. You're one of the finest anchors that I have interacted with.
Thank you.
You
so
talked about intellectual property rights. Well, this business has been going on since at least the 19th century. There are several conventions about this, the Berlin one, Paris one, etc. What is important, sir, in the last year, 2020, 2021, I've learned a lot of new phrases, new words. I'd never sort of used these so regularly. Furlough, social distancing, flattening the curve. And now I'm learning something new. It's called vaccine nationalism, which occurs when government signs agreements with pharmaceutical manufacturers to supply their own populations with vaccines ahead of the vaccines becoming available for other countries.
Sir, vaccines and essential medications are treated as a market commodity rather than as a public good.
Right.
At the time when the world should be talking of communism, I'm not talking of communism, communism, we find references to exceptionalism in very poor taste. You know, the Americans can be trusted to do the right thing after they've done everything else. So last month, the U.S. State Department spokesman said pompously that it is in the world's interest that Americans are vaccinated first and then the rest of the world will be safe. अरे किस प्रकार का घमंड है ये तुम लोगों का? यही तो कार्ल मार्क्स ने 170 साल पहले गाली दी थी to your system, which you still don't seem to understand. This belief that the devil takes the hindmost. They forget, sir, that not too long ago, their own president and the prime ministers of India, Japan and Australia had agreed to supply 1 billion COVID-19 vaccines to countries in the Indo-Pacific to be manufactured by India with US and Japanese funding and held by Australian logistics. ये क्या हो रहा है, sir? We do not know if the vaccine stop the transmission.
ये double standards हो रहा है. ये double standards हो रहा है. This is double standards.
Absolutely, sir. We do not know if the vaccines will stop the transmission. What we do know is a person like me, at my age, I'm almost 70, who has been vaccinated, my immune response is quicker. It means that the virus cannot really mutate very quickly inside me. So we need a global response to this pandemic. Vaccine nationalism, this kind of reluctance to waive temporarily, sir, we're not asking for a permanent waiver, to waive temporarily the patents on these vaccines, this exposes the fact, sir, that we live in a very unfair world.
You are right.
It is them, it is their world, and it is our world. There is the north-south divide. Sir, take a look at this figure. It is obscene. Only 1 billion of the estimated 11 billion doses needed have been administered so far, and 0.2% of these are in the low-income country. Sir, मेरे खून का रंग अलग है अंग्रेज के खून के रंग से. What kind of arrogance is this? And I've lived my life long enough. I've been in diplomacy for 50 years and counting. The decisions that the Americans make today will come back to haunt them in the future. There is no question that it is the center, the epicenter of global innovation, of global intellectual activity, the freedom to evolve. Now that they have decided after so long, as you said, after 8 months, that they will agree to a temporary waiver, then the other countries will follow them. And who are these countries? These are the countries who have always said, we are great humanitarians, UK, European Union, Australia, New Zealand, etc. But when push comes to shove, where are they, sir? It's an imperfect world, and these guys are making it even more imperfect.
Right. I'll come back to you. So we have Advocate Karman Singh. Karman, can you please explain for our viewers what is this issue about IPR rights and what it involves?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Kaul. So, just fundamentally, when companies, they develop these vaccines, so a lot of private companies have been involved in the development of these vaccines, they apply for patents, and patents are essentially national rights and jurisdiction-based rights, which protect these companies, basically to allow them to prevent anyone else from manufacturing these vaccines or any medication for that matter. So here the problem arises with respect to the patents, that if these companies want to sell it at a certain price, or they want to sell it in a certain location or a certain quantity, no one else can come and say, okay, I'll do it instead and I'll sell it for this price at this because I can do it. But it is important to note that here is patents the main problem that we are facing. So the main backlash that comes from the other side, which is a fair enough argument, is that do we want to kill long-term innovation? Do we want to kill incentive? And the answer here is that no, we do not want to. But whenever a patent is granted, exceptional situations like pandemics and national emergencies have always been considered for. So the law provides for these situations where there are exceptional situations. So both of those need to be balanced. The aim does not have to be to kill the incentive for people to innovate and research. The aim is not to make sure that people do not make money when they take risks But the aim is to make sure that people get vaccinated, people get out of this cycle and waves of coronavirus in all countries, as has been said by the Honorable Ambassador.
But Karmendra Singh, as we talk about that patent issue, it has been an issue for, for decades rather, that it is holding back research or innovation, isn't it? Because it is discriminatory in favor of developed world and against developing countries. What do you say?
No, I think it is in fact the opposite. So it depends on what you're discussing, right? The investment required for these biomedical research is very, very large. If the people who are investing into this do not have some sort of protection that if they make breakthroughs, they will be able to protect their rights and make money, which is the main incentive here, they will not be investing it in the first place. So either we have a situation that there are no vaccines at all, or vaccines take years and years to produce. These vaccines were produced. Pfizer came out with the vaccine within, I think, 10 months.
Then let me. Then why is there are companies like Pfizer or AstraZeneca or even Bill Gates opposing such a waiver, temporary waiver? Why?
Because they are in the position to do it, right? They have already ordered. They already have in place 1.5 times, 2 times, 5 times the number of vaccines that they require. So now they're in a position where they can say no. If they were in a position where they had a shortage of vaccines, they would not be saying it. And furthermore, it is important. So, for example,
does it not make discriminatory? Not allow it?
There has to be some sort of inequality first to exist in order for something to be aimed for, right? Yeah. Either we can say that there will be no vaccines nowhere without any incentive. But now that the incentive has been given and these companies are making a lot of money, it has been seen that Pfizer has made billions of dollars in profit this year. Moderna and AstraZeneca will be turning profits this year. So at some point that balance has to come, that all right, there's a responsibility towards society by voluntary licensing, by voluntary companies coming out and saying that all right, we'll now supply to these countries which have a shortage themselves in the first place.
Okay. So Ambassador Vora, when we talk about discrimination, when I mentioned about discrimination, so recently we heard, if we talk about recent, USA has given in principle, they said that we'll negotiate the we will have tax-based negotiations and all that on this waiver issue. But at the same time, some countries like I think Germany are opposing it. German Chancellor Merkel recently was quoted as saying that we have allowed India to become the pharma giant and at the cost of Europe and all that. So that is why I am asking, isn't it discriminatory, these IPR issues?
There is no question about it. With due respect to our colleague on the panel, who is one of the finest legal minds in the country, I know about you, sir. Let me just say that those who oppose this TRIPS waiver, trade-related intellectual property rights, they argue that intellectual property protection is key to vaccine discovery and that without it, future innovation will be limited. Sir, when it's a question of putting profit before people, no, sir, I don't accept this system. On the one side, there is the legal position. On the other side, there is the human position.
Right.
My vote is for the human position. While recognizing that patents provide essential incentives for companies to invest in drug and vaccine discovery, already I'm told that 18 billion in public funding has already been spent to support the development of COVID-19 vaccine. Public funding. Shouldn't that compel a patent waiver? Sir, we have the world's greatest ability to produce generic vaccines at affordable rates. You remember HIV, sir? When AIDS was ravaging our planet, Cipla was able to sell antiretroviral drugs for less than US $350 per person per year. American companies, US $12,000 per person per year. So there's another Indian company, heard the name, Bharat Biotech.
Yeah.
1998, its most affordable hepatitis B vaccine under US 20 cents per dose as compared to US $50 from the rich countries. In 2015, it developed the gastroenteritis rotavirus vaccine for US $1 per dose as compared to US $200 from American Big Pharma. And in 2016 came its Zika virus vaccine. So therefore, India, South Africa, and about 100 countries were not as rich as these 15% of the world's population that dominated the other 85% for 200 years. We sought a temporary waiver. I keep repeating, sir, it's a temporary waiver that we have sought, given the crisis situation. Nobel laureates, senators have been pushing the Biden administration that you should do this. But of course, sir, and I know this because I've lived and served in America, pharma giants have hired dozens of sleek-haired, silver-tongued lobbyists, and their aftershave stinks of the profit motive. They argue that a waiver on intellectual property would discourage innovation. They forget that we are asking for a temporary waiver.
Right.
Sir, I ask you this question, Mr. Call. If patents have to be broken to save millions of lives, as India did with the antiretroviral drugs for HIV/AIDS, would you do it or would you not if you were president of the world? I would do it.
Of course, it should be done. That's what I favor this. That's what I'm saying. So, Karmanya Singh, I come back to you. As you heard Ambassador Vora about telling that.
Yeah.
How, I mean, this is what I also feel, that patent is used for profiteering rather than innovation or something.
Of course not.
So
because
I'll tell you why. Because once you get patent of a drug or vaccine or something, then you can, I mean, sell it at any cost you want, isn't it?
Yes. Okay. So
you can dictate terms, you can dictate distribution terms, you can dictate everything.
Yes. Just taking a step back. So patents are not fundamentally, if you go into the jurisprudence of patents, they are something that incentivizes sharing of knowledge in exchange for 20 years of monopoly, right? So it has been over time, it has been seen that it is better for people who research and innovate to share their knowledge in exchange for society deciding that, all right, for the next 20 years, you will have a monopoly on selling it. And I agree with Mr. Vora. We've reached a situation where the human aspect completely has to overcome the profiteering aspect. The profiteering aspect has been achieved. But I think there is a little concern that I have as to the ability for India to mass produce it. Why should we have to depend on international vaccines when we do have a developed vaccine? In fact, two, one being manufactured, developed outside India. Why should we depend on international vaccines? Point one.
No, I'll add to that. In fact, my argument is, why should only two companies produce those two vaccines? Why should it be spread over?
Just let me complete. So one, why should we depend on international companies to waive their patents? Why shouldn't we just license the patents and the technology that we have developed in India? Secondly, there is a Sputnik coming as well, and we have completely negotiated that without having patent waivers. Thirdly, Moderna has now come out and said that if anyone wants to manufacture the Moderna vaccine, they will not enforce the patents during this stage. So I think there is a major concern regarding the manufacturing capabilities and the expertise that need to exist, because the patent themselves are just the start. The manufacturing capabilities and the expertise need to parallelly exist in order to make the most of it. Just waiving the patents does not get vaccines into people's arms. It is important that that is also in place. So those are my couple of concerns that exist. And I am not against vaccine waivers, the patent waivers at all. In fact, I am for it. In this situation, we are in dire need of it. Yeah. And the patents don't need to be broken, Mr. Vora. The patents don't need to be broken.
We'll come back. We'll continue the discussion. We have to take a short break and we'll come back and continue the discussion. We'll take a short break and continue this interesting discussion on IPR issues. Welcome back. We are discussing about IPR issues and whether IPR patenting should be given a waiver, temporary waiver, because of the COVID situation on the drugs, COVID drugs and COVID vaccines. So we have Ambassador Vora and Karmanya Singh, advocate here. So Karmanya, you were saying something about, please continue about that. You were talking about.
So I was saying that patents don't need to be broken. In fact, the TRIPS agreement and all of the treaties that have existed for IPR have always thought about this, that there will be situations where patent law, patent rights need to be overcome by the humanitarian aspect of the lives that they will save. And I 100% agree that what happened with HIV when Dr. Yusuf Hamid with Cipla made sure that in Africa, in African countries and India, HIV did not become a pandemic by producing generic drugs and so selling them for negligible price. That was an amazing feat that was achieved by humanitarian aspects. So patents do not need to be broken. There are multiple provisions in the Patents Act in patent laws of multiple countries,
But
including the US.
patent may not be broken, but maybe they should be tweaked. The patent law should be tweaked. So
there is
that
no need. Patent law just needs to be implemented. That's it. The law exists. The government needs to exercise its rights, or it needs to tell companies that it will have to exercise these rights if the demands that are increasing in India are not fulfilled.
okay, I'll go to Ambassador Vora about is this patent right or patent issue holding back India from mass producing the COVID vaccines, which are essentially required?
Aware, sir, to answer your question, and Mr. Singh knows this better than I do. His legal mind is very, very sharp. That the United States has a monopoly on many of the essential ingredients that go into making vaccines. So theoretically, I cannot do anything. The Russians can't do anything. The Chinese can't do anything. Not that the Chinese care. Nor can the Europeans, without getting approval from the Americans, because they have this stranglehold. They accuse the Chinese of exploiting global supply chains, but they seem to be doing the same thing. So I just want to make one point. The waiver will come sooner or later. Is it too little? Too late? The obvious disparity in global vaccine access has already had a dramatic impact on the poorest countries.
Right.
What I'm seeing is an awful hierarchy of health that mirrors the inequalities of global wealth. So take a look at the figures. Cameroon, population 27 million, I've served there. Libya, 7 million, I've served there. South Sudan, 14 million, I was your ambassador there. As of 8th May 2021, they have all administered less than 1,000 doses in total. Honduras, 10 million. Philippines, 110 million, the population. Thailand, 70 million. Less than 1% of the population is fully vaccinated. Palestinian population, 5.2 million. Less than 1% fully vaccinated. Compared with Israel, population 9 million, 2/3 fully vaccinated. What kind of logic is this? How can anybody sleep at night when we have figures like this? All I want to say, sir, getting the world vaccinated is
So
the critical test of our time.
does it uphold my point that it is discriminatory? Patent rules are discriminatory.
You put it brilliantly, Mr. Call. I couldn't put it better. The discrimination, the evidence is hiding in plain sight. I mean, the idea during the Second War, they all got together, the Russians and the USSR and the Americans said, let's go clobber the Nazis. The war ended and they were on opposing sides. What happened then? Why don't you come together today, put aside your differences, forget about profit. United States is a $22 trillion economy. I'm a $3 trillion economy. The rest of the world put together, the developing countries.
Right.
All of Africa, sir, all the 54 countries of Africa are a $3 trillion economy. All 54, the
Yeah.
same size that India has.
So
Why don't we put this aside for the moment
Right.
and say, guys, we are all human beings. Let's get together to help each
Yeah,
other.
the right time
That's
is
what
now.
Mahatma Gandhi said.
Human lives have to be saved, as many as can be saved, and that is why IPR, this waiver should be granted, but we can only debate and discuss about it. The time of this program is over today. Thank you both of you for participating.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
This is all in the agenda today. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with another important topic on Monday. Till then, goodbye.